Madam President.
Senator from South Dakota.
Madam President, I would like to speak to an amendment that I filed at the desk that I'm working with the managers of the bill to try and address concerns that they might have in order to get it accepted. But I wanted to speak to it, if I might, just a little bit this afternoon. And essentially what the amendment is, it's really just a sense of Congress regarding the federal government's use of spectrum, and in particular, spectrum use of the Department of Defense. Spectrum is a very important resource to the Department of Defense, and it's also a very important resource to the private sector. Unfortunately, spectrum is becoming a scarcer and scarcer resource and is increasingly necessary for there to be better and more efficient management of this scarce resource. Demand for spectrum is sharply rising due to the growing advanced network of communications devices that rely on spectrum to transmit and receive information. The rise of mobile devices like smartphones and tablets, the iPhone and the iPad over the past few years, the reason for this sharp rise in demand for spectrum. According to a recent study by Cisco, last year's mobile data traffic was 8 times the size of the entire global internet in 2000. The Cisco study predicts that global mobile data traffic will increase 18-fold between 2011 and 2016 at a compound annual growth rate of 78%, reaching 10.8 exabytes per month by 2016. The rise of the smartphone and the tablet has contributed significantly to our nation's economy. The nation's mobile communications industry, by one estimate, directly or indirectly, supports 3.8 million jobs, contributing $195.5 billion to the U.S. gross domestic product, and driving $33 billion in productivity improvements in 2011. With all that's gone wrong with our economy over the past several years, it is important that we as policymakers nurture the growth of the economy, especially where growth is already happening, and in fact, is exploding. We need to enact smart pro-growth policies as it relates to spectrum. I know that the spectrum issue isn't easy to understand or to manage, but it is crucial that we seek to better manage this scarce resource, and where it is possible, allocate more of the scarce resource to the private sector where it can create jobs and grow the economy. That is the reasoning and purpose behind my amendment. The federal government controls a vast amount of the available spectrum for its own use. It is probably not all as efficiently managed as it could be. Undoubtedly, a substantial amount of this spectrum could be made available to help create jobs and grow the economy. One of the low-hanging fruits that we can deal with almost immediately is the band of spectrum known as the 1755 to 1780 megahertz band. This spectrum is particularly well suited for reallocation to commercial use because it is identified internationally for commercial mobile services and is used for that purpose throughout most of the world. This 755 to 780 band is also immediately adjacent to existing domestic wireless spectrum and would fit seamlessly into the current mobile broadband spectrum portfolio, allowing for more immediate equipment development and deployment. There's no reason for further delay in the reallocation of the 1755 to 1780 band for commercial use. This band was identified for commercial broadband use internationally at the 2000 World Radio Communications Conference over 10 years ago. Despite the international designation of the band for advanced wireless use, it is still allocated domestically for government use, heavily by the DoD. The National Telecommunications and Information Administration, or NTIA, the agency which is responsible for all government spectrum, issued studies and reports in 2001, 2002, and 2010 that addressed use of the band for commercial use, but took no action. The spectrum was also identified in the National Broadband Plan as potentially available for reallocation. In March of 2012, NTIA released its latest report assessing the availability of the band. Unfortunately, the 2012 NTIA report contains no firm deadline for action and no clear path to making the band available for commercial use. It contemplates a potential 10-year time frame and potential shared use of spectrum, but defers any formal recommendation regarding reallocation until the completion of still further study. Had NTIA acted when the band was first allocated internationally for advanced wireless use, the band might already be available for commercial services. Without a firm deadline, DoD is unlikely to agree to reallocation, and the prospects for reallocating the 1755 to 1780 megahertz band for commercial use remain slim. That is why my amendment urges the President to direct federal users on that 1,755 to 1,780 band to prepare, not later than May 31st of 2013, a reallocation plan that includes the costs of relocating from this band and urges the Federal Communications Commission to reallocate this band to commercial use. I hasten to add that it is important that the costs of relocating the band should be verifiable and transparent. The report for the underlying bill requires the Government Accountability Office to determine if the cost of vacating or sharing the 1,755 to 1,800, I should say 1,780 band is sufficiently captured in estimates. I look forward to the GAO's report on this issue. There are those who may voice concerns about how this may impact our national security. I take a backseat to no one in being pro-military. I sat on the Armed Services Committee for 6 years. I have an Air Force base in my state that I care deeply about. It is important to understand that existing law provides ample protection to DoD for the relocation to replacement spectrum. There are those concerned about the cost to DOT to relocate. The law requires DOT relocation costs to be covered by the Spectrum Relocation Fund, which is funded through the proceeds of the auction of the band to commercial licensees. If the auction does not raise 110% of the relocation cost, the auction would be canceled, assuring that incumbent users are made whole. Moreover, as part of the Middle Class Tax Relief and Job Creation Act of 2012, Congress expanded the scope of funding from the Relocation Fund to include the costs of planning for relocation. I am confident that the Pentagon and the larger federal government can more efficiently manage its spectrum holdings and make available additional spectrum to help grow our economy and create jobs. I hope, Madam President, that we can work this out to have it included as part of the Defense Authorization Bill. I certainly believe it's an amendment that's important with regard to the issue that I mentioned, and that is the reallocation, relocation of spectrum in this country to allow for multiple uses, obviously important private and commercial uses out there, and enormous demand that is adding significantly to our economy and creating jobs for literally thousands and millions of Americans. Madam Chairman, with that, I yield the floor.